Hey, Husker fans, good morning on this Monday. Welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is my co host, Danny Gillette. And we are back here after another huge win on the road for the Nebraska basketball team. It's a clean sweep of Iowa, 2-0 in basketball, 1-0 in football. And Danny, how are you doing after another big win for the Huskers on the road?
A little bit tired. All the partying from this weekend, a lot of good news in several sports all around. So a little tired, but happy to be here on this very happy Monday with a lot of exciting stuff this weekend.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy, but yesterday was the third time this season, that Fred Hoiberg and the Huskers have went on the road as a double-digit underdog and won the game. They were an 11-point underdog. They were a 14-point underdog to Rutgers, and I think like 12 to Creighton. So just a huge win. And man, it's they proved me wrong. In my predictions, I said Nebraska wasn't going to go in there and win a 3-point battle, and that's exactly what they did. I didn't think they could win a shootout against Iowa, and they did. I mean, 6 guys hit threes, 4 guys hit multiple 3-pointers, and the defense stepped up. The rebound was shaky, but the last couple of minutes they got it done, and this team might be going to the postseason beyond the Big Ten tournament next week.
And I believe they play on, let's see, is it Wednesday night? Is
Yeah,
it
Wednesday night.
against
Yep,
Minnesota?
yep,
So
against Minnesota.
to me, that is a very favorable matchup. I think, I think some years we've kind of watched this team enter the Big Ten tournament and we said, oh, they're going to get bounced the first round. But I think there's a very winnable first round game against Minnesota on Wednesday. And who knows, maybe I might put together a live stream for that. That will keep me awake. And also, it will be cool to interact with you guys. So we'll see. It's not often that we get excited about Nebraska basketball, so we might as well take advantage of it.
And one big thing, I've seen some NIT bracket projections, and Nebraska's still kind of on the bubble there. But a win against Minnesota would clinch a winning season for this program, which to me would be a huge deal, regardless of whether they get an NIT berth. But I do think that they should, if they win that game against Minnesota. I mean, they their worst record would be 17-16, and I feel like with all these quality wins. I mean, Iowa's going to be in the tournament, and they beat them twice. They beat Creighton, and they're going to be in the tournament. Penn State looks like they're going to make it in, and they beat them. Rutgers is on the bubble, but they beat Rutgers. They beat Maryland's going to be in the tournament. Wisconsin's a team that's also on the bubble. So I mean, Nebraska's beaten like 5 or 6 teams that are in the tournament, and they've beaten a few of them on the road. I mean, they've got 3 road wins, and frankly, I mean, if you look back at this, if they had beaten Purdue and Michigan State, um, they'd be sitting at what, 18-12 right now, or 18-13. They'd probably be like they'd probably be right there, in the bubble conversation to make the tournament. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. Obviously, to make the NCAA, they'd have to win, 5 in 5 days, which I don't believe anybody's ever done in Big Ten history. But just to get a winning season would be a gigantic step forward, I think, for this program.
I still have cold sweats when I think about the Purdue game. I'm not going to say a missed opportunity because I do believe the game was officiated very poorly in that one, and then the Michigan State game, they just absolutely blew that one. So that was definitely their fault. But I'm excited to see how the season finishes, and more importantly, when it finishes. Will we see the NIT? Can Nebraska make a big run in the Big Ten tournament? Because, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a Nebraska fan, but when you look at the Big Ten tournament bracket, we've been able to contend with most of the teams in the conference. So who knows? I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they can do. And like we said before, the one thing I really like about this team is that they play together and play for each other. So as long as they keep doing that and they continue to play good defense, they definitely have a shot on Wednesday and beyond.
Yeah, and, looking at if they win that game against Minnesota, they would face Maryland. For a while, it looked like that might be Michigan State, which just seems like a really bad matchup for Nebraska. So, I mean, if you play Maryland on that Thursday, like that's another game. Nebraska just beat Maryland, so it's hard to beat a team obviously a couple times in a row. But Nebraska definitely has a chance to make a run in this tournament. And I just have to give a shout out to Sam Griesel yesterday. I mean, 3 3-pointers, and they don't win that game without him. Kind of like the Creighton game, he just was huge. And I mean, if you look at all the transfers, he was by far the biggest addition for Nebraska. And hopefully, they can get some more in-state recruits down the road. Because man, it would have been nice to see him doing this for a few years for the Huskers instead of just this past season.
I know it makes me so sad that we don't have him for at least one more year. Kind of like Trey Palmer, and
Yeah.
that's the good and bad of the transfer portal. You fall in love with these guys, and a lot of them only have 1 or 2 years left of eligibility. But one of the things that really stood out to me yesterday or Sunday was the play of Jamarcus Lawrence. He's been playing really well over the past couple of games, and Sunday was another example of that. I like the versatility he brings to his game in terms of being able to drive to the hoop, but also not being afraid to pull up and take a mid-range jumper. He's aggressive. I feel like he takes very smart shots. He's not just trying to play hero three-point basketball. He tries to drive into the paint, and he knows where he can shoot and where he's good at. And for a point guard, that's a good skill to learn. And I am really, really excited about the future that he has with this program. And people tweeted at me yesterday, and it's a good question, or this is a good statement. It's sad that it took injuries for Fred to see the potential of Lawrence, but he's making the most of it. And we talked about it before. Guys like Lawrence, Sam Hoiberg, Denham Dawson, they're making the most of their time on the court. And in regards to Lawrence, I'm excited to see his progression next season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you had a great article there on HuskerBigRed.com about kind of his impact. This is his third straight game with double digits, in scoring, double figures in scoring. Yeah, I think he's going to be a really solid player. Can attack the basket. I mean, he had 3 threes yesterday. I think this is the third straight game he's hit at least 1 3. I know he hit multiple against Michigan State. I mean, Tom Izzo even gave him a shout out. So definitely the Huskers have found one of their starters for next season. And if you think about him and, if they could get Tominaga back and CJ Wilcher. I mean, those guys, that's three, quality 3-point shooters. And that's something you can kind of build on and at least, have those pieces. And another thing I like about Lawrence too, he's a really good athlete. And I think he's a pretty good defender. And sometimes, it does take a little bit of time for that light to come on for, these freshmen, but it's really come on for him. And I feel like he's going to have a big impact next year. And it'll be interesting to see what this roster looks like. But, a lot of guys, even, Breidenbach had a solid game yesterday. We kind of ripped on him the other day and he must have been listening. He put in some solid minutes and it was a short bench from Fred Hoiberg. But I feel like some of these pieces that are coming up, might fit pretty well together next year if they can add, another couple of pieces in the transfer portal, a big and then another kind of a true point guard.
And Lawrence reminds me a lot of James Palmer Jr., like just the way he plays offensively, his ability to drive to the basket and the mid-range jumper. But, and I ripped on Breidenbach a little bit yesterday because, he took a bunch of questionable three-pointers like in the beginning of the game, but he kind of, found his groove towards the end. I just feel like he doesn't know what type of player he is, and that's kind of confusing for both him and the team. I like him more on the inside, attacking the basket in the paint, but I mean, hopefully he can kind of find his identity next season because there's some moments when the light turns on and you're like, oh wow, this kid can actually be pretty good if he can just stay healthy. And then there's other moments where you're like, what the hell are you doing out there? So, I mean, I'm happy that he played a better second half of Sunday's game, and I'm hoping he really finds his identity as a basketball player coming up next season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all fits in. I mean, we know that Juwan Gary's going to be back next year, so he's going to be in that 3-4 role. But Nebraska's going to need minutes at that 4-5 position. Derek Walker obviously is moving on. Bandamel could be in a position for that. I do think obviously Fred's going to bring in somebody to compete for that position, and hopefully they'll be able to get a proven scorer down low because they don't. That's kind of the one thing they don't have. Going into next season is a guy that they can feed the ball to on the block. But still a lot of basketball to play in this season. And, the yeah, it's been a long time since I've actually been excited about the Big Ten tournament. And, Minnesota has been playing better. They just beat Rutgers and had a pretty close game with Wisconsin. So let's not overlook that game against Minnesota. But, yeah, a chance at a winning season. And, just to sweep Iowa, just massive for Fred Hoiberg, and just another feather in the cap for Nebraska fans after that win in November. So it's great to see that going, and hopefully we'll have another good run this week in Chicago.
In a year where he needed to coach his ass off, Fred Hoiberg has absolutely done that. And it's been interesting, and I've said this before, to see the team really kind of come together, especially after the injuries to Bandamel and Gary. And, I think Hoiberg has done a really, really good job of, finding this team's identity and finding his identity and how this relates to that team. And, I'm really happy with the job he's done. This team, I don't know about you, but they've definitely surpassed my expectations for what I thought they would do coming into the season.
I thought that they could make the NIT, but I definitely, not with the injuries to Bandamel and Gary. If you'd have told me that, I wouldn't have thought so. So definitely exceeded expectations, and to go 6-2, down the stretch against this schedule. I mean, I remember we were talking like this team might not win another game. I mean, we actually said that, and
I was
so for
thinking more like 2-6, not six and
yeah,
two.
so I mean, for them to pull a complete 180 is just over the in that 6-2 stretch, there hasn't been a basketball coach in the country as good as Fred Hoiberg. I'll just say, or better than Fred Hoiberg. He's been as good as anybody over this last month. So good job, Fred. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend. And I wanted to shift a little bit of gears to some football recruiting visits. I know, Danny, you had some articles up there, and it was kind of an interesting weekend. Carter Nelson kind of made a surprise visit last Thursday, Friday, and we had another top target in the state of Nebraska, Isaiah McMorris, who ended up making a surprise visit, called up Garrett McGuire over the weekend. Sounded like everything went really well. Sorry about that. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Isaiah McMorris, another top 5 player in the state, taking a surprise visit over the weekend?
Well, I looked at the picture of him and Garrett McGuire side by side, and I couldn't tell who was older. But at any rate, I think McMorris coming to campus and seeing Nebraska once again. I mean, all of these visits to me are really good for Nebraska. I mean, to me, um, you know, it's about who gets the last visit, right? Who gets the final say, and who can make the most impact on that final visit. But the fact that McMorris is coming in, and he's the type of player, you know, a Wandale Robinson type, in my opinion. He has that sort of speed. He's not exactly the tallest at 5'11", but neither was Wandale. And you saw the electricity he brought on the football field. He can do McMorris can do a lot of things with his speed. He can return kicks. He can run, jet sweeps. He can, just catch the ball and completely turn on the Jets. So McMorris would be a great get for Nebraska football, and honestly, a pretty good get for Garrett McGuire as he tries to establish a recruiting rapport with prospects.
Yeah, and just you look at in-state targets. We've talked about how important these guys are, and McMorris is one of those guys. Top 500 overall recruit. If he's third or fourth in the state according to most recruiting rankings, so that would be a big get. And yeah, I do think that Garrett McGuire is going to be. I've predicted that he would do a good job on the recruiting trail, and looks like he's made some early relationships with McMorris, and that's a really good thing. And there was an offensive lineman that visited over the weekend, Gibson Pyle, a 3-star out of Texas. So a couple of guys kind of getting things going with this, the recruiting dead period, which ended on the 1st. Dylan Raiola was in California, was at USC yesterday. And he, was quoted as saying, he loves it every time he goes there and comes back. I mean, it's LA, it's USC. I mean, what's not to love about the visit? So we'll see. He's still coming to Nebraska later this month. I think, to me, it feels like USC's moved up a little bit. I know Oregon's trying to get a visit. I think Georgia's definitely, fading a little bit. And, I know that they're hosting Jake Merklinger later this month. So USC might be kind of the new favorite, I guess, in terms, not the new favorite, but the new kind of competitor, I guess, for Nebraska. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. What do you think about, the latest visit from Dylan Raiola to USC?
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, you look at Lincoln Riley and what he's able to do with his quarterbacks and wide receivers. I mean, he always gets some of the premier weapons to throw to, and the knock on Lincoln Riley teams hasn't been offense; it's been defense. But Dylan doesn't have to worry about that. So, you know, he has talked to Lincoln Riley, pretty often, and to me, USC would be more of a threat than Georgia just because of, I mean, what kid wouldn't want to commit there? It's LA, it's sunny, it's California. You play with Lincoln Riley, basically rule the West Coast. You get all these nice wide receivers. You get the history, which I do think matters to a lot of kids, in this case, because a lot of kids remember playing, NCAA '05 with Reggie Bush, and Reggie Bush went here and all the stars. And, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he committed to USC. I mean, it's hard to say no to Lincoln Riley in terms of what he's been able to do with quarterbacks and wide receivers. And, you know, I would definitely put them as more of a favorite than Georgia at this point. I mean, if he committed to the Trojans, that would not surprise me one bit, because yeah, we have the, Nebraska appeal and his family went there. But if I'm him, I'm looking at, who has Nebraska developed at the quarterback position lately in the NFL? Nobody. Who has USC developed? Quite a lot of NFL, all pro, Pro Bowl players. So it wouldn't shock me in the least.
Yeah, and we should know the On3 prediction machine now has USC in the lead after this recent visit, and I guess the reason is pretty clear to see why. Since Raiola decommitted from Ohio State, he's taken 2 unofficial visits. Both have been to USC. He did take that dead period visit to Nebraska last weekend, or the 2 weeks prior, but that wasn't per se what you would count a recruiting visit. And the prediction machine kind of takes in those visits to account. So I don't have a problem with it right now. It's USC at 33% or 36%. Nebraska's right there at 28. So I think that makes sense. I think the Huskers are still in this, but yeah, they definitely are going to have to overcome that. And like we said, or I guess like I said on Monday or Friday, if Dylan Raiola is going to commit to Nebraska, he's going to have to take a leap of faith, right? Because there isn't the NFL kind of history here with quarterbacks. There's not, the history of winning. So Matt Rule has been a proven coach and has done a lot of those things, but he's going to have to kind of sell that to Dylan Raiola to make that leap of faith. So we'll see if they can get him to kind of take that. But yeah, it definitely wouldn't shock me at all if if USC was able to win out in the end. But again, like I said, if he does go there, it's going to be a battle of 5-star quarterbacks. And my guess is that at some point, Dylan Raiola or Malachi Nelson would be transferring, because I really don't see, Dylan Raiola going and sitting there for 2 years if Malachi Nelson's the starter. And I don't see, if Dylan Raiola goes there and beats him out, I don't see, Malachi Nelson's obviously not going to wait. So if Dylan Raiola does go there, that's just kind of the way the new world works with the transfer portal. Then USC is going to lose a 5-star in the next year or two, via the portal. So
And
that's that's
and
my thoughts
then
on it.
and then Malachi Nelson comes to Nebraska and all is right with the world now. But 3 crystal balls were put in last night. Medium confidence crystal balls, all with a confidence score of 6. The one I pay most attention to is Steve Wiltfong, and he put in the most recent crystal ball at 7 o'clock last night with, like I said, medium confidence score of 6. So I don't know. I think, quite honestly, USC is the number 2 in Raiola's recruitment. I still think Nebraska is in the lead, but I think it's shrinking, and I think it's shrinking quickly. So, we just gotta prepare for, not landing Raiola. That's how I'm looking at it. That's how I'm preparing for it. I want him to come here. I thought he, was trending towards Nebraska, but in terms of quarterbacks, Georgia and USC is a whole different ballgame. So let me ask you this: they don't land Raiola, what's their backup plan? Because every interview that Daniel Kalen's done, Nebraska hasn't come up in the conversation at all.
Yeah, so I didn't. That just kind of hits me. I mean, the fact that he got crystal balls from Wilt Fong, Greg Biggins, and Bear, and those are the Biggins and Angelo are the 2 top guys on the West Coast. So I put their predictions right there with Wilt Fong. Nebraska is definitely not in the lead now with Dylan Raiola. I mean, that's 100%. That doesn't mean that's not going to change with visits, but USC has made a real move here. And if I was Nebraska, I would start communicating with Daniel Kalen right now. Like, they need to do that right now, because I mean, maybe you could flip him, but USC seems to be trending up. It's close to his home. Like you said, there's so many proven things Lincoln Riley is the quarterback guru. And so, if he's not worried about, the competing with another 5-star quarterback, then yeah, USC makes a ton of sense. That being said, Steve Wiltfong also put in his crystal ball for Malachi Coleman to Colorado, and Matt Rule was able to turn that around. So crystal balls aren't everything. How many times we've seen, Dante Moore committed to Oregon and then he flipped to UCLA. Jaden Rashada, went to Miami, and then he went to Florida, and then he went to Arizona State. So, I mean, these guys flip a lot. It does happen. So I'm not saying like, if Raiola commits, it doesn't mean it's the end of the line. And the same with Daniel Kalen. I mean, depending on where he goes, there's no reason to say Nebraska couldn't push and get him, but they have to pick up that communication now. And because look, he's a top 500 kid. We've talked about him quite a few times, and I feel like you look at his offer sheet, it's been expanding. More teams are kind of getting interested in him, and as the quarterback board starts to shrink a little bit over this summer, if he's not committed, he's going to be even come a bigger priority for some of those other schools that are looking for quarterbacks. So yeah, I would definitely, start trying to get him onto campus for a visit. And the all the eggs in the Dylan Raiola basket doesn't look like it's going to work out right now.
I'm just thinking about the West Coast arms race. You got Malachi Nelson, potentially Dylan Raiola, Dante Moore. Like, man, that is quite something. And guess what? They're all coming to the Big Ten. So, I mean, maybe the 3-3-5 defense is gonna get tested pretty quickly. But I really hope that Nebraska can somehow land Raiola. But I'm preparing myself as if they're not going to, and kind of panicking a little bit. Not that we're not landing Raiola, but our backup plans don't seem to be set in stone, or at least, I don't see a direction as far as the backup plan goes yet. Maybe that'll change. Recruiting is quick,
Yeah.
things happen quickly, but they gotta think of something quick, and I'm sure they do. But I'd like to see something as a fan that says, "Huh, maybe we'll start going after this guy."
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when you read off those, I didn't realize they'd put in those crystal balls, and so when you read that off, and then that does set off the panic a little bit. I didn't expect, it's like if Rayola was coming for a visit, I wouldn't expect a ton of crystal balls for Nebraska. So that just an unofficial visit for them to come out with that trend is a little
Yeah,
concerning to me. But it's but going back to the crystal ball thing, like with Dante Moore, we talked about with UCLA. Who was Dante Moore's crystal ball leader for like 2 years? It was Michigan. They had all of them. They had like six, and it didn't work out that. So just because the crystal balls go a certain way doesn't always mean it's going to end up that way. So I would be panicked a little bit. I am freaking out a little bit. I'm not going to lie, but don't worry about it. It's not the end all be all. There's still plenty of time for Nebraska to turn this thing around. And look, if they don't get Dylan Raiola, it's not. I don't think that that's going to. People have put a lot on this. This can still be a really successful recruiting class with or without Dylan Raiola in it.
yeah, and I think it's not so much that people. Like, I'm not personally panicking about the crystal balls. I'm more just looking at it again from the standpoint of what Lincoln Riley has done with quarterbacks. Because when
Yeah.
USC enters the conversation and you're a quarterback, you definitely should take that call and take that visit. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm more just thinking about having to face Dylan Raiola, Malachi Nelson, and Dante Moore in a couple of years. So that's a little scary, but this is where Tony White earns his paycheck, earns his big bucks. So we'll see. I mean, they just better have a good backup plan ready. That's all I'm saying. I mean, and I've said before that they should put all their eggs in one basket for Dylan Raiola, but I mean, now maybe they should start looking at other options.
Yeah, they may need to, give that because I do think Daniel Kalen would be. I've wanted him in the class for a long time. And look, he's interested in Nebraska, but when I interviewed him, he talked about making a decision fairly quickly in the new year, and it's kind of been extended out a little bit. So I feel like he wants to make a decision in the next couple of months, and if Nebraska's going to get in on that, they got to do it soon. So we'll see what happens. It could be a situation where I mean they're hosting Rayola for a visit in a few weeks, but on the back channel thing, I would definitely start communicating more with Daniel Kalen, and maybe they have been. I'm not sure. I know I've seen those interviews where he hasn't said a whole lot. And look, it's not hard to figure out who Nebraska's top target is at quarterback, but that doesn't mean they can't circle back and make him a priority. I mean, he did say that Matt Rule told him, hey, I don't want you to leave the state of Nebraska. So they have kind of established that, and they're going to have to probably renew that kind of recruitment because unless they make a kind of a splash in a couple weeks, which look they could come out of that visit in Lincoln in a couple weeks and say, hey, Nebraska's really made a big kind of momentum shift. And like I said before, I think this is going to come down to him going back and doing official visits in May and June and all that, and then we'll get a decision midsummer. That's been my prediction all along. So there's still time to run this race, but definitely I would be making more contact with Daniel Kalen for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about who is coming on that visit, at the end of March, and if Dylan Raiola commits, is Carter Nelson gonna go to Nebraska or USC? Is Isaiah, well, not really Isaiah McMorris, but Carter Nelson, I think, is the big guy for me. Like, are other dominoes gonna fall? There's so much weight. There's so much, kind of waiting from everybody on what Dylan Raiola is gonna do, and it just makes me uneasy. I don't know. I really, especially with those crystal balls last night, I'm not comfortable with where Nebraska is right now.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. No, I'm not either. I was hoping that Wilt Fong would be changing his crystal ball to a Nebraska one, and look, the fact that USC's got Rayola on campus twice, and yeah, basically every coach or every quarterback that Lincoln Riley has coached in his career has gone on to the NFL. So it is that there is a lot to sell there, and we'll see. Nebraska is definitely going to have to make up some room here in the next month or so. With this unofficial visit coming up.
And also, where do you want to be in the winter? Lincoln, Nebraska, or Los Angeles, California? I don't think that's a hard choice for me. I mean,
That's true.
as
Yeah.
much as I love the Huskers, I mean, the LA scenery and all that. I mean, that does appeal to kids, and I don't know. I think these crystal balls and USC entering back into the race is kind of concerning, and you have to look at it. You know, UCLA has Dante Moore. Yes, USC has Malachi Nelson, but they had to be prepared. And you said last week, good programs take two good quarterbacks, and Malachi Nelson and Dylan Raiola is not a bad 1-2 punch for the Trojans.
It's definitely not. So we'll be keeping you up to date with that. And finally, just to kind of wrap things up here, it's been not just was it a good weekend for the basketball team, but there was kind of a lot of things happening for the Big Red over the weekend. On Friday, the baseball team came out, won its fourth straight game, upset number 7 Ole Miss, I believe, which was the first ranked win I think since 2019 for Nebraska.
Vanderbilt, not
Um,
Ole Miss.
yeah,
Ole Miss
sorry,
is Sunday.
Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then they lost to Ole Miss on Monday.
yeah,
My bad. But still, to come out and they faced one of the best pitchers in the country, just hammered him. And I mean, Vanderbilt is a team that is in the mix for the college baseball national
always,
championship
always.
every year. So, legitimately, this makes me feel like Nebraska could be a contender in the Big Ten this year.
Absolutely, and we kind of were a little bit down on the program after the weekend, but Max Anderson has been swinging the hot bat, and the pitching has held their own, and it seems like the cardiac kids, they make things interesting, but you never feel like they're out of a game. Kind of like the basketball team, you never feel like they're out of a game. They always seem to play hard, and this weekend really showed me something. I said they would go 2-1 on the weekend. I had them beating Ole Miss and not Vanderbilt, but I'll take a 2-1 weekend any way that I can get it.
Yeah, and it was, Trey Palmer had a great day, with the combine. I know you wrote about that. He, ran a 4.3, which obviously wasn't a huge surprise to anybody with, what we've seen from him over the years. But yeah,
Well, I think it
he,
was because people don't really pay attention. Like the national media doesn't pay attention to Nebraska football. Let's be honest here. I mean, I think for a lot of people it was surprising because they're like, "Damn, this kid went to Nebraska, and now we're just finding him." Because all the scouting reports I've read about Palmer in terms of his NFL draft projections, they have him as like a late fourth round pick, and I think he definitely increased his stock.
Yeah, I think he gave himself a good chance to go on day 3. I mean, to me, he looks like a solid day 3 guy. He could be a slot. He could play on the outside. Because he's, slot receivers don't generally catch, multiple 70-yard touchdowns. And so, I mean, I get offended a little bit when people kind of, try to say Trey Palmer is a slot. He's not a slot, dude.
No,
I mean, he could be a slot receiver, but this guy is one of the best deep threats in the entire 2023 draft. And some team like the Chiefs or somebody's going to get, they're going to get this guy in the 3rd round and they're going to be
Chargers.
like
Yeah.
doing backflips because, I'd love to see him in Green Bay. I'd love to see him next to Samori Toure.
I'd love to see him in New England, and maybe Bill Belichick can finally hit on a
Yeah.
receiver. But I think he really kind of improved his stock in this one. I really do. And then I just saw because I was reading all the combine measurements. Vokalek had the 5th most bench press reps by a tight end, so he did. He did us proud, and all the guys did us proud. I mean, I think you know in a program that hasn't had a lot of recent success to put as many guys into the NFL as we have is a true testament to, the type of athletes they are and quite frankly, how bad Scott Frost was. But anyway, um, I think we're going to see more NFL draft picks in the coming years. I mean, fingers crossed because the NFL loves speed and Lord knows Nebraska has a lot of it right now.
And we're going to get more, I think, with Matt Rule. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think the draft picks are going to be trending up for sure. So it was a good weekend for those guys, and then also, Nebraska. It was the Big Ten Wrestling Championships, and the Huskers crowned their first Big Ten champion in 8 years. Silas Allred won the 197-pound championship. He beat number one Max Dean of Penn State, and Penn State is like the Georgia, basically, of college wrestling. So it's huge to knock them off. And Nebraska actually had, I think, a few guys that made it into the finals. They took third. So the NCAA tournament, in wrestling will be later on this month. So we'll see, if Silas Allred maybe can make a run at a national championship, because basically, like, the Big Ten is it's like, how the SEC dominates football. Well, like, Big Ten wrestling is that on steroids. I mean, it's like 8 of the top 10 teams in the country are like from the Big Ten. So if you win a Big Ten championship, you can win a national championship. So that'll be fun to watch. Silas Allred. And then we should mention too, the softball team beat number 16 Arizona over the weekend. They went 5-0, and they've now won 9 straight games. So Huskers really kind of sprinted into those spring sports.
They really did, and we kind of didn't expect them to, but here they are, and it's gonna make for a fun spring. I know we always look forward to the fall and winter sports, but I think the spring is gonna be fun as well. I'll be interested to see what the baseball and softball teams do. I think a lot of good momentum was picked up this weekend, and the wins they were able to get can serve as springboards for something bigger. I mean, and so I think that's a good thing, and it'll be interesting to see, what they do and if they can keep this momentum up because, successful spring sports and just something successful for Nebraska would be much needed and, good for the programs.
Yeah, and I'm a Cubs fan, so I don't have a lot to follow during baseball. So I mean,
I'm a Red Sox fan, so yeah, we're
it'd be
kind of
great.
screwed.
It'd be great if the Huskers could put together a baseball season, and because I do love baseball, but I don't get to watch it a ton. So it'd be awesome if, But I do love that ESPN and some of these like college baseballs made more of a push. Like, I think it should be shown a lot more. It's a great sport. I
Yeah.
love it.
I like it better than Major League Baseball, especially when your team gives away Xander Bogaerts and lets him go to the Padres, and they still charge you $50 for parking and $20 for a beer. I'll watch college baseball all day. Screw the Red Sox, but no, I agree. I always thought that college baseball should be, given more of a national spotlight, and it just feels like there's more offense to me, and there's more excitement in the games because the kids are playing for the love of the game, and I know people say, "Oh, NIL's changed that and all that stuff." They still love the game, and I'm sure the major leaguers do too. But it's also very helpful when you can get a $25 million per year check or something crazy like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it'll be fun to see, Will Bolton, these guys. And after this weekend, though, it looks like, they've got a chance to make some noise in the Big Ten. So we'll have, all the information on that. And we'll have some previews, for the Big Ten tournament this week. Nebraska's going to be playing Minnesota, all of your recruiting information. So make sure you, hit the subscribe button, get into, the comments section. Let us know what you think about all this recent success from Nebraska or everything on the recruiting trail. Make sure you guys are checking out huskerbigred.com. We have articles up there on the daily from Danny and myself covering basketball, recruiting, anything else. It's actually, we should mention too, Matt Rule is going to be doing a press conference today. I believe Thomas Fedoni is also going to be meeting with the media about 11 Central Time. So, we'll
His
have some.
conditioning team won the little battle that they had in house. So I'm wondering if it's going to be about conditioning.
Yeah, it just will be interesting to see. Thomas Fedoni hasn't met with the media, I don't know if ever, and it'll be interesting to see what Matt Rule has to say. But there's always kind of content coming out of there, so I'm sure we'll have some articles up on HuskerBigRed.com, and we will be back later again this week for another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.